Discussion on verses 1 to 7 of 7. This chapter opens by briefly explaining how denying or neglecting accountability on the day of judgment leads to destructive moral traits, which in turn produce corruption and injustice within society. Chapter 107 Al-Ma'an, verses 1 to 3.
Have you seen the one who denies the recompense? For that is the one who drives away the orphan, and does not encourage the feeding of the poor.
These verses show a direct connection between disbelief in final accountability and harmful behavior toward the most vulnerable members of society. The denial of recompense is not presented as an abstract belief alone, but as something that manifests in conduct, specifically in neglecting or mistreating orphans and failing to care for those in need. This demonstrates that inner belief and outward morality are deeply linked. On an individual level, peace of mind, and on a societal level, justice are inseparably connected to belief in accountability on the day of judgment. When a person sincerely believes that every action will ultimately be accounted for by Allah, the Exalted, they are less likely to misuse the blessings granted to them, such as wealth, health, influence, or authority. This awareness creates an internal sense of responsibility that restrains harmful impulses and encourages fair conduct. Without this belief, however, a person may begin to see life as unrestricted, leading them to prioritize personal gain over moral duty and the rights of others. When individuals convince themselves that they will not be held accountable for their actions, this mindset often leads to boldness in wrongdoing, especially when worldly consequences appear avoidable. As a result, blessings that were meant to be used responsibly become tools of harm. Wealth may turn into greed and exploitation, authority may become oppression, and social relationships may be reduced to self-interest. This distortion of purpose not only damages others but also removes inner tranquility from the individual, as unchecked desire rarely leads to lasting satisfaction. Chapter 29 Al-Ankabut, verse 36.
Expect the last day and do not commit abuse on the earth, spreading corruption.
Belief in accountability on the day of judgment therefore functions as a strong moral restraint. It disciplines behavior by reminding a person that no action is hidden and no injustice is ignored. Every deed, whether large or small, will ultimately be brought to account before Allah, the Exalted. This awareness encourages sincerity in intention, humility in conduct, and responsibility in decision-making. It also helps a person to properly align their blessings with their intended purpose, ensuring they are used in ways that benefit both the individual and those around them. At a broader level, history and observation show that when societies weaken or abandon the belief in accountability, whether divine or moral, corruption tends to increase. In such environments, laws are often manipulated for personal benefit, the weak are neglected, and those in power may exploit others without restraint. By contrast, when accountability is strongly upheld, there is generally a greater emphasis on justice, compassion, and protection of rights. The belief in ultimate accountability therefore serves as a moral framework that encourages integrity even when external oversight is absent or limited. On an individual level, this belief ensures that blessings are used in a balanced and responsible manner. Wealth is directed toward rightful obligations, authority is exercised with fairness, and relationships are maintained with sincerity rather than exploitation. This creates a stable inner condition, as the individual lives with the awareness of having fulfilled their responsibilities in accordance with divine guidance. On a societal level, this same belief contributes to the protection of rights, the reduction of injustice, and the strengthening of social harmony. In contrast, when accountability is ignored, imbalance becomes widespread. Individuals may prioritize desire over duty, neglect obligations, and harm others without concern for consequences. Over time, this weakens families, disrupts communities, and allows corruption to spread more freely. However, when belief in accountability is present and active, it becomes a stabilizing force that preserves order, encourages fairness, and supports collective well-being. Ultimately, belief in the Day of Judgment is not merely a theological idea, but a foundational principle for both personal and social well-being. It shapes character, governs behavior, and ensures that blessings are used correctly. Without it, disorder and injustice increase, With it, responsibility, balance, and peace are established in both individual life and society, as well as in the life to come. But because preparing for one's accountability by obeying Allah, the Exalted, often goes against human desires and worldly ambitions, many people choose to persist in disobedience. This creates a state in which a person gradually loses inner balance, failing to achieve a sound mental and physical condition, and also failing to place priorities, relationships, and responsibilities in their proper position. At a wider level, this attitude contributes to the spread of injustice and corruption within society, as personal desire is prioritized over moral responsibility. Chapter 107 Al-Ma'an, verses 2-3.
For that is the one who drives away the orphan, and does not encourage the feeding of the poor.
These verses highlight how denial of accountability does not remain a private belief, but becomes visible in social behavior. One of its clearest manifestations is neglecting those who are most vulnerable, such as orphans and the poor. Driving away the orphan reflects emotional hardness and social irresponsibility, while neglecting the feeding of the poor reflects a lack of concern for basic human dignity. Together, they show how the absence of accountability leads to a breakdown in compassion and justice. In general, in Islamic teachings, orphans are frequently mentioned because they represent individuals who lack protection, strength, or social leverage. This makes them especially vulnerable to neglect or exploitation. For this reason, a person is encouraged to actively support those who are socially weak, including orphans and widows, according to their ability and means. In the present time, supporting such causes has become relatively simple, as many structured systems of sponsorship can be arranged quickly and efficiently. The effort required is often minimal compared to everyday discretionary spending, which highlights that the barrier is usually not capability, but willingness and prioritization. Acts such as sponsoring orphans and assisting widows are strongly emphasized in the traditions of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, including the promise of closeness in paradise for those who care for orphans, as recorded in Sahih Bukhari, number 6005. Likewise, it is mentioned that those who care for widows and those in need are granted rewards comparable to continuous voluntary worship, as recorded in Sahih Bukhari, number 6006. These teachings illustrate that support for the vulnerable is not a minor act, but one of great spiritual value. They also serve as encouragement for those who may struggle with consistent voluntary acts of worship, showing that meaningful reward can also be attained through serving others. At the same time, it is important for a person to recognize that all means they possess, including wealth and opportunity, ultimately originate from Allah the Exalted. These blessings are not absolute possessions, but trusts placed in human responsibility. In this sense, they resemble a loan that must be returned in a meaningful form. The repayment of this trust is not the return of material wealth itself, but its proper use in ways that are pleasing to Allah, the Exalted. When this understanding is present, it prevents a person from developing a sense of pride or entitlement, as though they are doing a favor to others or even to the Creator. Instead, it becomes clear that Allah the Exalted is the true giver of all blessings, and that every opportunity to help others is itself a form of favor granted to the giver. The person in need also plays a role by accepting assistance, allowing the giver to earn reward and fulfill responsibility. Without such opportunities, a person would be deprived of the ability to earn this reward. This understanding protects good deeds from being corrupted by arrogance or self-importance, and preserves sincerity in intention and action. Finally, the scope of aiding those in need is not limited solely to financial assistance. It also includes fulfilling lawful needs in emotional, physical, and social forms, such as offering support, care, and kindness where appropriate. In this way, every person, regardless of wealth, has the ability to contribute in some form. No one is exempt from this responsibility, as everyone is capable of alleviating difficulty in some capacity. Allah the Exalted then highlights and criticizes the patterns of conduct that emerge when people replace divine guidance with man-made systems designed to serve personal desires while still maintaining an outward appearance of righteousness. These systems often preserve rituals, social customs, or public displays of morality, yet they lack sincere accountability and genuine submission to a higher moral code. Chapter 107 Al-Man, verses 4-6.
So woe to those who pray, but who are heedless of their prayer. Those who make show.
These verses draw attention to a form of behavior where outward acts of devotion are performed, yet the inner reality is absent. The warning is not limited to prayer itself, but extends to any action where sincerity is replaced with performance, and accountability is replaced with self-interest. In this way, worship becomes a display for people rather than a sincere act, and moral conduct becomes similarly shaped by image rather than truth. In reality, when a person abandons divine guidance and instead adopts systems shaped primarily by human preference, the underlying motivation often becomes the fulfillment of personal desire. This is because human-made codes of conduct, no matter how refined they may appear, are ultimately influenced by human limitations such as self-interest, bias, cultural pressure, and shifting values. Unlike the divine law revealed by Allah, the Exalted, which is grounded in perfect knowledge, justice, and mercy, human systems are vulnerable to being shaped by the ambitions of those who design or control them. Within such frameworks, those with wealth, influence, or authority often become the most deeply invested in preserving systems that protect their position. Acceptance of divine accountability would require them to submit to a higher moral standard that restricts exploitation, limits excess, and enforces justice even when it is personally inconvenient. As a result, some may resist such guidance not because its truth is unclear, but because its implications challenge their lifestyle and authority. This resistance can lead not only to personal rejection but also to encouraging others to remain within the same system of belief and behavior, preserving collective habits that support worldly advantage. Chapter 38 Sa'd, verse 6.
And the eminent among them went forth, saying, Continue and be patient over the defense of your gods. Indeed, this is a thing intended.
Such reactions illustrate how leadership figures in society may attempt to preserve established systems, even when they are confronted with clearer guidance. The motivation is often not a lack of exposure to truth, but a reluctance to lose status, influence, or cultural dominance. This creates a cycle in which truth is resisted, not through lack of understanding, but through attachment to worldly benefit. Historically, opposition to the holy prophets, peace be upon them, has frequently come first from societal elites. These individuals often recognized the moral strength and clarity of divine messages, yet still rejected them due to pride and concern over losing control over their communities. Their rejection was therefore rooted less in intellectual disagreement and more in emotional and moral resistance, particularly the unwillingness to restrain personal desires or accept accountability before Allah, the Exalted. From this perspective, rejection of divine guidance is rarely a purely intellectual issue. Instead, it is more often a matter of internal inclination, where the heart resists limits placed upon desire and accountability. The outward arguments may appear to concern doctrine or tradition, but the deeper cause frequently lies in the reluctance to submit fully to the authority of the Creator, and to live within the moral boundaries that such submission requires. This inevitably leads to the misuse of the blessings granted by Allah, the Exalted. When a person becomes detached from accountability on the Day of Judgment, the natural outcome is imbalance in both thought and behavior. Instead of using blessings in a disciplined and purposeful manner, they are often redirected toward excess, self-interest, or neglect of responsibility. This creates instability within the individual, affecting both mental clarity and physical well-being, as actions become driven by uncontrolled desire rather than measured responsibility. Over time, this also leads to a failure to properly prepare for accountability before Allah, the Exalted, as priorities become centered on immediate gain rather than long-term consequence. Although such a person may still experience moments of worldly comfort or material luxury, this does not equate to true peace. Inner stability is compromised when actions are not aligned with moral responsibility and accountability. This internal conflict often manifests as stress, dissatisfaction, or confusion, as a life built upon imbalance rarely produces lasting tranquility. At the same time, relationships and responsibilities within a person's life become mismanaged, as people and duties are no longer given their proper place or importance. As this condition continues, it also contributes to broader social harm. When individuals fail to recognize accountability, they are less likely to fulfill the rights of others. Acts of kindness, fairness, and basic assistance begin to diminish, not necessarily through active hostility, but through neglect and indifference. This gradual withdrawal of responsibility creates an environment in which injustice can spread more easily, as the weakest members of society are no longer supported and social obligations are ignored. In this way, even the simplest forms of good conduct are disregarded. Chapter 107 Al-Ma'an, verse 7.
And withhold simple assistance.
When such attitudes become widespread, society as a whole begins to weaken. Trust between people diminishes, cooperation declines, and social bonds are eroded. Over time, this leads to a structure where injustice becomes normalized and fairness is no longer actively upheld. In contrast, when accountability before Allah, the Exalted, is firmly believed in, even small acts of assistance are valued and preserved, helping to maintain both personal balance and social harmony. Therefore, a person is encouraged to wholeheartedly accept and consistently apply the teachings of Islam for their own benefit, even when these teachings require them to set aside personal desires or immediate inclinations. Their attitude should resemble that of a sensible and trusting patient, who relies on the judgment of a skilled physician. Such a patient recognizes that a prescribed treatment may be uncomfortable, demanding, or restrictive, yet still accepts it because it is known to bring recovery and long-term protection. In the same way, divine guidance may at times challenge habit or comfort, but it is ultimately directed toward a person's true welfare. Just as a disciplined patient attains physical recovery and mental stability by adhering to medical advice, a person who follows divine guidance attains clarity of thought, emotional balance, and inner tranquility. This is because only Allah, the Exalted, possesses complete and perfect knowledge of human nature, and what is required for a person to live a balanced and meaningful life. Through this perfect knowledge, every blessing, responsibility, and relationship is placed in its proper position, preventing excess, neglect, and disorder. Human knowledge, no matter how advanced, remains limited and imperfect. Despite extensive progress in fields such as psychology, biology, and human behavior, human beings are still unable to fully resolve every difficulty or remove all forms of emotional distress, instability, or hardship. Human judgment is always shaped by incomplete experience, restricted understanding, and personal bias. As a result, human systems may provide partial benefit, but they cannot offer complete guidance for every situation or guarantee lasting inner harmony. In contrast, Allah, the Exalted, possesses absolute and unrestricted knowledge, and has already conveyed through the Holy Quran and the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, everything necessary for a person to live a balanced and purposeful life. The difference between those who follow divine guidance and those who do not can often be seen in their conduct and the outcomes of their choices. Those who align their lives with Islamic teachings tend to demonstrate greater emotional stability, clearer judgment, and a more organized approach to life, even in times of difficulty. In contrast, those who turn away from these principles frequently experience confusion, inner conflict, and a lack of direction, even when they appear to have outward comfort or success. This contrast shows that true order is not merely external, but deeply connected to how a person aligns their life with divine instruction. Although a patient may not fully understand the technical details behind a medical prescription, they still place trust in the physician's expertise. However, Allah, the Exalted, does not call people to blind acceptance without reflection. Rather, He encourages them to think, reason, and observe the signs within themselves and throughout the world around them. Faith is therefore based on understanding and sincerity, not unexamined imitation. Chapter 12 Yusuf, verse 108.
Say, this is my way, I invite to Allah with insight, I and those who follow me.
Furthermore, Allah the Exalted alone has complete authority over the inner condition of a person, including their emotions and sense of calm. Chapter 53 An-Najm, verse 43.
And that it is He who makes one laugh and weep.
This highlights that lasting inner peace cannot be secured through external circumstances alone, but is ultimately granted by Allah the Exalted. It is closely connected to how a person makes use of the blessings placed in their care, and whether those blessings are directed in accordance with divine guidance. Those who live in harmony with this guidance generally experience greater steadiness, purpose, and emotional composure, whereas those who neglect or misuse these blessings often find themselves in confusion, inner turmoil, and dissatisfaction. In conclusion, genuine peace, whether of mind, body, or spirit, can only be achieved through sincere conformity to the guidance of Allah, the Exalted. This means recognizing that divine guidance is not a limitation on life, but a framework through which life gains structure, purpose, and harmony in both this world and the life to come. Chapter 16 and Nahl, verse 97.
Whoever does righteousness, whether male or female, while he is a believer, we will surely cause him to live a good life, and we will surely give them their reward in the hereafter according to the best of what they used to do.
All praise is due to Allah, Lord of the worlds, and may peace and blessings be upon His final messenger, Muhammad, his noble family and companions.